I'm joined today by Jen Childs, who is speaking to me live from America. Jen, tell me a little bit about who you are and where you're calling from, please.
Well, I am talking to you from Royal Oak, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. And I am a um, feminist woman, mother, wife, burlesque dancer, business owner. I own my own interior design firm. And yeah, we had kind of shared an exchange because I wrote some articles for you guys back in March about what it's like to come out of an abusive relationship and the healing that comes from that. And also have written some stuff about, my journey in burlesque. So I'm very glad to do this interview and talk a little bit more about that.
It's lovely to have you here. So you've had quite a journey, haven't you, through life? You've certainly not followed the sort of traditional path that many people do. In your articles, as you mentioned, you've covered your story of abuse and thankfully escaping abuse and regaining your strength, which is a fantastic story itself. And you also shared some wonderful information about your journey into burlesque and how that's helped you to reach out to your feminine side. So if we just have a little chat about your overcoming abuse, tell me a little bit about sort of the story there and sort of how things went along and how really what you took from that can help other people. I think would be a really great message.
Sure. So for me, it started out like any other relationship. I met this person, we connected, it was very intense. And at the beginning, I would say beautiful. I felt like a soulmate connection in a way. And I think that for me, the process of how it evolved into an abusive relationship, the best way to describe it is kind of like putting a frog in a boiling pot of water, but it's not quite boiling. It's just slightly warm, and you just turn the heat up slowly and the frog doesn't know what's happening because it's just kind of becoming accustomed to this new temperature until it is just too late. But in my case, thankfully, I didn't wait until it got any worse. So it was a 2-year relationship. And the abuse, I would say, started out more on the emotional and psychological level about 6 to 8 months in. And by that point, I was really in love and really committed to helping my partner because he was going through a lot of things in his own life. And it was really hard for me to see what was happening. Like I just thought, well, he has problems and he can't control his feelings, or he's, has outbursts, but I'm going to be able to help him become a better person. I'll be able to help him see what real love can do. And what ended up happening in the process is I started to lose myself. I started to lose my own self-worth and self-esteem because I kept on giving into this kind of behavior that he would inflict on me. And I would let down my boundaries, basically. But things that I had been very clear about from the beginning, like I don't, I want to be respected. I want to be treated with kindness. I want to be treated with compassion, things that are very normal and that you would think you don't have to explain, right? But
Yeah.
that kept on happening over and over again. And at some point, the abuse became physical. And the incidents happened when he was drinking heavily. So he says he had no recollection of it. And I was very clear he had to go to rehab. That wasn't acceptable. But I remember making a note, for myself at that point, kind of, which was at that point was like a year and a half into the relationship. So this is how long it took for it to get to that point. And I think it's really important to explain to people abusive relationships don't start out abusively. You would never fall in love and put energy and time into somebody that treats you badly from the first start. But that's not how it happens. The person is usually very charming, very charismatic, very loving, and you fall in love with this side that they present to you, right? And the reality is that they know who they really are. They know they can't truly be themselves or treat you in the way that they're used to treating people right away, because they have to gain your trust and they have to get you to open up and get to a point where they have control over you. Okay. So when you realize, looking back on it, that's how it happened. And I think that for a lot of women, we have a tendency to blame ourselves. Like, well, how could I let this happen? How could I let this person do this to me? It must be my fault, or I was just not smart enough, and like, just to give you some background, I'm a highly educated woman. I have a master's. I own my own business. I've lived all over the world. I'm not somebody that was born yesterday, but it still happened to me. And that was one of the things that, for me, coming out and writing the story, it was so important. I wanted to share it with other women, to say, like, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you are suffering in silence because somebody is disrespecting you and abusing you in any way, emotionally, psychologically, physically, sexually, it's not okay. And you have to have the strength to recognize that you deserve better, and it isn't your fault. But what is your fault is if you stay. That is the choice. Do I continue to allow this behavior and expect that this person is going to change? Or do I recognize the patterns of abuse that continue to happen over and over again and just tell myself, enough is enough, right? And for me, enough is enough came to a point where I had done so much for this person because I wanted to help them, to the degree of just like really just putting my heart and soul into like trying to help them go through, addiction, the death of a parent, trying to help them do an estate sale, helping them buy a house, fixing it, things that are like you do for somebody that you're going to be with for the rest of your life, right? And it still didn't make a difference. I still was being treated like garbage. I was being talked down to on a regular basis. There were outbursts. He would like yell, he would throw things for no reason. And there was a moment when I finally kind of took a stand and I said, this is not acceptable. I'm done with this. You cannot treat me this way. And the reaction that I got was almost like elevated tenfold abuse. Like, when somebody, it wasn't just like a fight where somebody's trying to defend themselves or trying to argue with you. It's when somebody literally tries to break you down.
So
and
punishing you essentially then for standing up for yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And literally takes every single thing that they know about you and uses it against you to like try to say, you're not good enough. This is all in your head. You're too emotional. Like, I can't stand you. I mean, it's just like the kind of thing that below the belt punches over and over again. And I remember that day because I was sitting in his kitchen sobbing like a child. I couldn't even express myself. I was so scared to say anything back. And at that moment was kind of when I was like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be with somebody that can't hold space for me and listen to me when I say, hey, I don't like the way that you're treating me. These are the things that I really need you to do for me. Like, especially when it's not like the first time, it's like the 10th time. And so finally I walked away. I went no contact, which is a term that abuse survivors use to describe when you literally cut off all contact through social media. You block someone's number and you just go cold turkey. And the reason that you have to do that is because most abusers know how to reel you back in. They know that all they really need to do, because you're madly in love, is apologize and say, I didn't mean it, you know, or whatever they're going to say to you to try to make it better. And because you love that person and you are, most of us are compassionate and, you know, we have empathy, we forgive. And we want to go back and we want to relive those moments, those intense, beautiful moments that made us fall in love with that person to begin with. And that is how the cycle starts. You know, you start over again. And what you need to remember, no matter what, you will always end up in the same place. Okay. And once you recognize that there's no way to get out of that loop, you will always start out, even no matter what they do, and just end up in the same place. That I think is what may give you enough power to pull yourself out. And for me, also, it was recognizing that I had just enough strength at that moment to get out. But if I allowed him back into my life again and I went through that cycle again, I might not have enough strength to pull myself out the next time. And who knows if I would ended up worse in terms of like depression and like feeling suicidal and stuff. And this is a real thing. Like a lot of abuse victims that are with narcissistic partners for long term end up so depressed and so broken down that a lot of the times they will end up committing suicide. So it's a real issue. And I think that like when you talk about abuse, people in this society automatically think black eyes, broken ribs, oh, that's abuse. Yeah. Well, no, that's abuse. Sexual abuse is abuse. But when you have somebody hurting you emotionally and psychologically and making you feel like you're not worth anything, that's severely abusive in a way that can really devastate you, right? Because we need to be with people that care for us and empower us and make us feel our best. Otherwise, we're better off on our own. Mm-hmm. The world is hard enough to live in. There's enough coming at us. We don't need that kind of energy. And so for me, the healing journey was really cutting that person off, recognizing what had happened, going through the stages of grief, acceptance, and recovery and healing. And once I was far enough down the road was when I was like, it would really make a difference if I spoke out, you know, and I didn't call him out by name. And I have no intention of doing that because it's not about ruining somebody. It's about sharing a story that I know I'm not the only person that's going through it. Right. And since that's happened, I think I've shared with you that I've had women reach out to me that read the story on your website from Italy or Spain, you know, different countries where there's more of an old-fashioned idea of what abuse is. And they have said to me, oh my God, thank you so much, because I am going through this. And being able to read your story was like getting validated that like, it is not okay. And I should not have to put up with this. And I can stand up and I can leave. And then a woman in Italy literally translated both stories, both parts of the story, and has been posting it on her survivor groups in Italy because she said there isn't enough information for women in her country. So that to me is like a huge success. You know, if you want to look at a situation that was very painful and say, well, what came out of it? Well, I've been able to become stronger from it. I know now that I will never allow anybody to treat me that way, no matter what. And the first red flag that turns up, I'm not going to make excuses, you know, just know like people don't change.
Talking
when
about
they show you who they are.
I was going to bring up red flags. Looking back, are there red flags that looking back now you would say these were obviously red flags in hindsight and things you'd warn other people to look out for?
Sure. So I think the first thing I would say is when you are starting to get to know somebody and you're first dating, you know, within the first, 6 months, see how they react when you say no to something. Okay. Like when you say, I didn't like that, or please don't do that again. If they try to manipulate the situation and make excuses for their behavior, or basically kind of turn it around on you in some way as if it's your fault that they're behaving in that way, that's a huge red flag. Because that says that they're not listening to you. They're not really intending on making any changes. And it's most likely going to happen again. And so have that kind of really clear in your mind. Like, when you create a boundary and you say this is not acceptable, your partner should be able to come and say, I hear you. I'm going to be respectful from now on, and that's not going to happen again. Because fights and arguments are normal. Getting into a place where you can kind of navigate the differences, that's normal stuff that happens in relationships, but it's about how it happens. The second thing I would say is be cautious of somebody that has a lot of different people in the mix. So, this could be like a third party, like just somebody that they're talking to, or an ex-girlfriend, or even just like anybody that they start to kind of position in a way to like pit against you or create triangulation, which is kind of like when they say something about you to them or the other person, and they start kind of creating a reality that is confusing where you stand in the relationship, right? So it's making you feel like you have to be competitive. It's creating situations where you feel jealous, and that's also very unhealthy. And it is one of the ways in which abusers create a situation where they start breaking down your self-esteem.
And I suppose they can use that to sort of almost make it look like you're the bad person in the relationship as well, can't they?
Exactly. So that's a really big red flag for me. And then the third one I would say is really pay attention to their history. So as they start to tell you stories about past girlfriends or friends or even family members, if it's always the same kind of narrative where they don't take responsibility for their actions and they just kind of create this like, oh, this person was great, but then suddenly they just went crazy, or they're just like, they're basically telling you who they are through their own interpretation of themselves. And the thing that I also want to say that I think is very important is abusers, for the most part, narcissists, psychopaths, anything of that nature, are not self-aware. Okay. Their reality, it's a real personality disorder, if you want to look at it that way. Their reality and their version of what's happening is so different. They will never take accountability. And that's the difference. That's the difference between the average person that has issues, because we all have issues, that has the ability to have a self-awareness and self-reflection and be like, oh, well, yeah, I could have done that better, or in the future, I will act this way. And then people that are going to be the same over and over again and always create excuses for their behavior. So those are the three big things I would say. If I had paid attention to that, how my boundaries weren't respected within the first 6 months on small things, how there was always some sort of drama or triangulation or third party that was basically making me feel like I wasn't sure where the relationship was or where I stood. And the stories that I kept hearing about the ex-girlfriends and even like relationships with the parents and friends, and how all of it always ended the same way, I would have been able to see it and say, well, this is actually my trajectory if I stay with this person. There's no difference. I'm not. And I think we want to think we're special. We all want to feel like, well, it's not going to happen to me because I am, together and I have so much to offer. And this person, clearly they just need stability and love. And I can provide that. And we all want to feel that our ego tells us like we can do better. It wasn't, in the other situations, it was the other person that they didn't do good enough. And you can't possibly understand until you've been through it that actually every single person before you probably went through the same thing.
So it's also important then, I guess, to be able to apply that, not to get so carried away in the romance of the moment, that you open up space for dialogue, isn't it? I think that could really help women. And of course, there are male victims of abuse, but of course, women substantially outnumber those in terms of victims. But to create space in a relationship for dialogue and for being yourself, I think is important then, isn't it? That you allow these situations to occur where you can get this bigger picture of who this other person is.
Exactly. Yes. I think that that's a big lesson for me anyways, moving forward, is whenever I meet anybody now and I just start getting to know them, I pretty much list my boundaries right up front, like within like a few dates. And I think it's healthy for people to have rules and for themselves in terms of how quickly they want to be intimate with somebody, because when you cross that threshold, it's pretty hard to come back. Okay, so it's healthier if you take your time, you set your boundaries, and you see how that person reacts. If they don't seem like they have the patience, or they think that you're asking for too much, then it's not really going to change out down the road. But if there's somebody that truly is interested in you, and they see you as a person, and they see you yourself, your worth, they're going to be fine with it. They're going to be fine with however long it takes for that intimacy to happen. And but as long as you have a strong foundation of who you are and what your expectations are, and you see that that's being met.
And escaping from this must be a very difficult process, because looking at your story, firstly you've got that process of realizing that abuse is happening, which in itself, it can be very difficult to sort of have that realization, I suppose. Then you've got that process of accepting that this is happening to me. I'm not responsible. It's not a reflection of my weakness. I am not making myself the victim. And then finally actually having that courage to get out of that. That's, a really challenging process, isn't it? It takes a lot of strength, doesn't it, to do that?
Yeah, and it does take time. I think that unfortunately, I didn't walk away the first time that it happened. I kept giving this person chances. And like I said, it wasn't until I could really step back and just say, like, wow, this is like a cycle, and I can see it clearly, and it just keeps happening. It keeps happening. And there's nothing for me to do other than just end this, or I will just be perpetually stuck, and I will just fall lower and lower and lower in terms of like how I feel about myself.
And of course, abusive people like to disrupt your own relationships, don't they? They like to cut you off from the people who would normally provide you a support net, the people you'd normally go to and say, look, am I having problems here? Is this normal? Did you find yourself cut off in that kind of way?
Absolutely. Yes. And that was something that also happened very slowly. So, I started out in the relationship. I was like, had a very full life and had my burlesque going, and I had my business. And this person took up a lot of my time, slowly but surely, to the point where I would say towards the end, I didn't really have much contact with my friends or family. And I was spending most of my energy and time on him. And I was also in a place where I didn't want to reach out to my friends or family, because the abuse and the stuff that was going on, I was subconsciously aware deep down that it wasn't something that I could really talk to anyone about. And mostly because I knew if somebody came to me, one of my friends or my sister or something, and said, I had this kind of situation happen, and it's not the first time, and they told me, I would have been like, hey, this isn't good for you, and you need to get out. I knew that was what was going to happen. I knew that was what I was going to get from my family and friends. And I wasn't in a place where I wanted to hear it, because I was so stuck in the loop, and I believed somehow I could change it. So it's again happens slowly, that you disconnect from people, you isolate because you feel ashamed, because the person is controlling, because they're taking a ton of your time. But yes, in the end, you find yourself in a place where you don't even know how to reach out and say, oh my God, I'm hurt. You're suffering in silence, basically, is
I
what
think
ends
for
up
those
happening.
people, what we will do at the end of this recording, we'll add some details both for America and the UK. There are, of course, some fantastic organizations that you can reach out to who won't judge you. They will listen to you. They will provide you support. So we'll add a couple of details at the end of the recording of other places you may wish to reach out if you do find you've been cut off, or simply not ready to reach out to people that know you. Because I think that is a problem for many people, isn't it? Is having the confidence
Yeah.
to reach out to somebody. And sometimes somebody who's neutral and outside it all can just give you that break, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And the
Jen,
other thing that helped me was therapy. I just want to say, like, if you can go to a therapist, if you find yourself in an abusive situation, you're not ready to leave, just start doing some therapy with somebody that can give you professional advice on how to get to a point where you are ready to leave.
I think that's really important because, in various areas, therapy is sometimes stigmatized a little bit. There's nothing related to weakness and going to therapy. Therapy is a brilliant thing to do, whatever you're facing. And definitely, as long as, you're careful who you choose for your therapy and make sure you've got that,
Absolutely.
that good rapport that you feel comfortable, isn't it? And I think definitely it can really help you to, overcome some of these things. Jen, I'd love to talk to you then about your journey in burlesque, because it is kind of interrelated, isn't it? It's about expressing yourself and being you. So where did your
Yeah.
burlesque journey begin?
So I lived in New York City about 15 years ago, and I saw my first burlesque show in my mid 20s at this place called the Slipper Room, and it blew my mind. I mean, I felt so inspired by the women and the performances that I saw. And I remember walking away that day and just feeling like, wow, this is something that there's something to this. I just have to keep going. I have to like find out more. And it was like 10 years down the line until I had an opportunity that presented itself where I was ready to do burlesque. So I was at that point living in Shanghai 10 years after, working as an interior designer. And I was also running a feminist festival there called Lady Fest. And I met this woman, Anna Phylaxis, who is a very famous UK performer who was living in Shanghai. And she was offering workshops at this festival that I was running. I took one of her workshops and it was so wonderful. I signed up for her school right away. And so that was kind of how it began. And I started performing in Shanghai for productions and shows that she was putting on. But really, for me, what it was about is finding my own empowerment through my sexuality. And I think that in society today, we live in a state where women kind of feel like, well, if I'm too sexy, I'm sending this kind of message, right? Or I can only be a professional business person, or I'm only a mom, or if I can balance those two. But it's like, no, like we are complex beings, right? And there's so many different facets to being you. And I think every woman out there would benefit from being able to express themselves in a way that was their own way of showing their sexuality, where they weren't necessarily doing it for anybody, they're just doing it for themselves, right? You just learn so much about yourself when you do that. And so for me, that was what burlesque was about. And you can definitely take classes and not perform. You can benefit from just taking a handful of classes and just doing stuff for yourself in your bedroom before you go on a date or something. It could really, the benefits could be amazing in terms of the confidence that it brings you. But it's something that I love to do. I love performing, love doing the choreography, putting together my costumes. And the journey is something that I've been on this now 7 years. And in the last couple of years, I've really been focused on doing Youre, which is a hoop that's used in like circus and aerial performances. And so I incorporated that. gotten more into fan dancing and chair dancing. So there's a lot of different things that I'm incorporating into my performance style. And I've also started doing more photo shoots with different photographers locally. So it's really empowering. Like, that's all I could say is like having this side of me that's being recognized, and it's not something that I'm doing for anybody else. I'm just doing it for me. And it does nothing and it's also nice that it's not financially tied to anything, because I have my own business that supports me, that's interior design. So I can be as creative and free as I want to. I don't have to think about, oh, is this going to get money? Am I going to get booked with this act? It's like, well, this is what it is. If you like it, book me. If you don't, I'm happy because I got to work on it.
There's a kind of a chance for you to be unrelentingly you then, yeah? And that's especially
Yes.
what you've been through. It's a chance for you to be absolutely who you are, to express yourself 100% how you wish to. It sounds like an incredibly creative kind of performance, an art form as well. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of people probably have a misconception of what burlesque is, don't they, really? I think
Yes. Yeah.
probably through media and just pure miseducation, misunderstanding, I think people don't realize how much freedom of expression it's giving people and how empowering it is. So
Absolutely.
where do you see the future of you and your burlesque? Do you have sort of any plans, any vision for the future?
Yeah, I do actually. What I'm hoping I can do is, through my performances, tell different stories that are empowering to women. My focus right now is working with different burlesque groups that are Latinx, so basically Latino performers in the Midwest, and they are using burlesque to tell stories of different historic figures in Latin history. So I have an opportunity to do a show. Hopefully I'll get in September, and I will be trying to do a performance based around Rita Moreno, who is like a famous Puerto Rican actress from the 60s who was in West Side Story. And so she was like kind of like the breakthrough for Latinos in Hollywood. And so that to me is so exciting, to be able to just take my experience as a Latino woman performer and link it to a historic figure and do a burlesque performance for that. Also, another thing that I really want to do, and I'm trying to hook up with local performers, is start a burlesque school that's kind of like a collective. So it's not run by one person, it's multiple people. It's open to anybody. So we're going to be LGBTQ friendly, and we want anyone to come in. And it is going to be very much about supporting and empowering members of that school so that they can really reach their goals. So there's a lot that I want to do, and I'm very excited about the future.
It sounds really fantastic, and I really wish you the best with the school. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I think you are somebody who, with the people you would work with, would create such a wonderful environment for people to feel safe and able to express themselves wherever they come from, whatever their background. And that's a really important thing in this world, isn't it? Is to have that safety and security. So I would love to see what comes of that. So do keep us informed how that develops.
Will.
And that's been, and you obviously perform under a stage name. So if anybody's interested in discovering more about your performances, if you would share your stage name for me.
Yes. My stage name is Marina Casanova, and you can find me on Instagram at Marina_Casanova_burlesque. So I welcome anybody to follow me. I put a lot of stuff in there, different photos, lyra practices, so you can keep up with what I'm doing. And I do have an upcoming show, June 4th, which I wanted to talk to you about really quickly because it is being broadcast from the UK. It's being put together by a producer there. It's called Crack the Whip Cabaret. And it's going to be live stream Zoom, and it is focused all on ethnic performers. So it's all non-white performers, and it's going to be broadcast throughout Europe and the US. So I will post about that on my Instagram page, but I welcome anybody that watches this that's interested to check it out June 4th.
That sounds like something really fantastic to be involved in. Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you ever so much for sharing your story, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you.